Right now, somewhere in Tanzania, a group of Hadza hunter-gatherers are sitting around a fire after dark. They've been doing this in essentially the same way for longer than writing has existed, and researchers who have spent time watching what happens at those fires have found something that changes how you think about almost everything you do after the sun goes down. For most of human history, the night wasn't empty time between dinner and sleep. It wasn't downtime. It was, by almost every measure, the most important part of the day. The hours when the things that made humans human actually happened. Not hunting, not foraging, not surviving. Something else. Something your brain is still running, every single night, whether you give it the right conditions or not. To understand what ancient humans actually did at night, and why it matters for who you are today, we need to untangle 5 things. What the fire actually changed about the night, what researchers found happening at Hadza campfires that shocked them, how ancient sleep actually worked, and why it wasn't what you think, the biological function that nighttime conversation was serving, and what your brain is still trying to do in the dark, and what you're giving it instead. Let's go. Here's the number that reframes the whole question. Researchers studying the Hadza of Tanzania, one of the last remaining hunter-gatherer populations on Earth, monitored their activity patterns over 20 days of observation. Across the entire observation period, all members of the group were simultaneously asleep for a total of about 18 minutes. 18 minutes. Over 20 days. At any given point during the night, a median of 8 individuals were awake. Not because they had insomnia, not because they were anxious, because the group had, across generations, developed sleep patterns distributed across age groups, young adults sleeping later, older adults waking earlier, such that the group was almost never fully unconscious at the same time. The night wasn't empty. It was occupied, continuously, deliberately, by a group that never fully went dark. So what were they doing in all those hours? Anthropologist Polly Wiessner spent years studying the Jew/Hoansi Bushmen of the Kalahari, another hunter-gatherer population, recording and categorizing conversations at different times of day. What she found has become one of the most cited studies in the anthropology of human communication. During the day, the conversations were practical, resource-focused. Who found what, where, coordination of tasks, complaints about the workload. When she analyzed the content of daytime talk, about 34% of it was what she classified as social criticism and complaint, and a substantial portion was economic, logistics, food, work. At night, around the fire, everything changed. Nighttime conversation was dominated by stories. Not gossip, not logistics, not complaints. Stories. About ancestors, about distant places and people, about encounters with animals, about the spirit world, about what happened to someone who broke a social rule and what came of it. 80% of nighttime firelight talk, in Wiessner's analysis, consisted of this kind of narrative. And critically, the stories weren't entertainment in the way we use the word. They were the mechanism by which the group transmitted its values, its history, its social rules, and its collective identity across time. A child sitting at that fire was not just hearing a story. They were receiving the accumulated knowledge of everyone who had sat at a fire before them, encoded in narrative form because narrative is the format the human brain retains most reliably. Wiessner writes, "Stories are told in virtually all hunter-gatherer societies. Together with gifts, they were the original social media. The fire extended the day into the night, and the night became the classroom." This is not metaphor. Fire has been in regular human use for at least 400,000 years, and possibly much longer. The transition from a species that went to sleep at dark to a species that gathered around a light source and talked for hours afterward is one of the pivotal moments in human cognitive evolution. Those extra hours no other animal was using, became the medium in which language deepened, culture accumulated, and the social bonds that made large group cooperation possible were forged and maintained. Somewhere in human prehistory, the first person to stay up late around a fire accidentally invented school, therapy, and the podcast simultaneously. But the talking wasn't the only thing happening after dark. The sleeping itself was strange, and nothing like what most people assume. Here's what ancient sleep actually looked like, and it probably isn't what you picture. Hunter-gatherer populations studied across Africa and South America sleep an average of 6 to 7 hours a night. Not 8, not 9. 6 to 7. Less than most sleep recommendations and less than most modern people believe they need. But more striking than the duration is the structure. Ancient sleep was almost certainly not a single consolidated block from dark to dawn. Historical records, pre-industrial sleep diaries, and anthropological observations of traditional populations consistently describe something called biphasic sleep. 2 distinct sleep periods, with a period of quiet wakefulness in between, typically in the middle of the night, lasting an hour or more. People woke up, they talked, they thought, sometimes they had sex, then they slept again. The idea that 8 unbroken hours is the biological norm is largely a modern invention. The biphasic sleep pattern has a well-documented history that most people have never been told about. Historian A. Roger Ekirch spent decades combing through pre-industrial historical records, court documents, diaries, literature, medical texts across Europe, and found hundreds of references to first sleep and second sleep as distinct and normal phases of the night. People would wake after several hours, engage in quiet activity, and then return to sleep. This wasn't insomnia. It was the expected structure of the night, so embedded in daily life that it appeared in literature, medical advice, and legal documents without any need for explanation. The consolidation of sleep into a single 8-hour block appears to have happened gradually after the Industrial Revolution, driven by artificial light, work schedules that required consistent morning start times, and the social pressure to maximize productive hours. Within a few generations, the biphasic norm was forgotten so completely that when people naturally wake in the middle of the night, they now experience it as a problem rather than as what their bodies were built to do. What happened during that middle-of-the-night waking period in the pre-industrial world is telling. Ekirch's records describe people praying, thinking, having sex, checking on children, talking quietly with partners, and lying in a state of relaxed wakefulness that some researchers have compared to a mild meditative state. The brain during this period shows theta wave activity associated with creativity and insight. Some historians believe the first sleep/second sleep window was when a disproportionate amount of human creative and reflective thinking happened. The quiet dark between the stories of the evening and the demands of the day. Now layer this onto the campfire data. An ancient human night looked something like this: work and logistics during the day, transitioning to communal storytelling around the fire in the early evening hours, drifting into first sleep as the fire died, waking in the middle of the night in a quiet, reflective state, perhaps talking softly, then returning to sleep before dawn. This is not the schedule of a species that collapsed exhausted into unconsciousness each night and woke up to survive again. It's the schedule of a species that structured the dark hours around social bonding, cultural transmission, reflection, and the kind of unhurried cognitive processing that doesn't happen when you're moving and doing. And here is the part that connects directly to you. Research on sleep function has established that the overnight period does something irreplaceable for the brain. It consolidates memories, processes emotional experience, clears metabolic waste through the glymphatic system, and integrates new information into existing knowledge structures. This is not rest in the passive sense. It's active neural maintenance that cannot be replicated by any other activity. What ancient humans were doing at night was, in effect, optimizing for exactly this: social processing in the evenings through story and conversation, followed by the sleep that integrated what they'd processed. The night was a complete cognitive cycle: input, integration, output. The most efficient thing your ancestors did all day might have been to stop doing things and sit by a fire talking about made-up animals. Step back, and the night looks completely different. For most of human history, darkness wasn't dead time between productive days. It was its own domain, governed by fire, by story, by the kind of conversation that doesn't happen in daylight when there are tasks to complete and resources to manage. The night was when the group became a group, when values were transmitted, bonds were maintained, the dead were kept alive in narrative, and the world beyond the fire was given shape through language. The sleeping itself was structured around this, not one long block, but a rhythm that included waking, reflection, and the middle of the night stillness that now gets diagnosed as insomnia. And then artificial light arrived, screens arrived. The fire was replaced by something that delivers content rather than creates it, something that fills the nighttime hours with input, but leaves no space for the processing that made those hours valuable. The night didn't get easier, it got louder. And the brain that was built for firelight and story is now trying to run that same ancient program in conditions it was never designed for. Here's the one thing. Tonight, in the last hour before you sleep, try this. Put down whatever screen you're holding and do what your ancestors did at that point in the night. Talk to someone. Tell a story about your day, about something that happened, about someone you're thinking about. Or if you're alone, write one. Not a to-do list, a story with a character and something that happened to them. This isn't nostalgia. It's a technical recommendation based on what the brain is designed to do in the hours before sleep. The storytelling fires were the processing period, the time when the day's experience got organized into narrative that the sleeping brain could then consolidate. Your brain is still running that cycle. It's still waiting, every night, for the story portion of the evening. What you give it instead, the scroll, the episode, the passive input, is content without the processing. Give it the fire, even for 20 minutes. See what changes. And if the idea that your brain needs something from the night that modern life isn't giving it unsettles you, wait until you hear what it needs from the morning. Why ancient humans never experienced the kind of chronic stress that's quietly damaging your body right now. And why your alarm clock is one of the strangest things evolution never prepared you for. That one's next.